Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever looked at a groundbreaking company like, say, Google or Apple, and just wondered, how do they do that?
Yeah.
How do they create something totally new, not just a slightly better version of what was already out there?
Right.
Today, we're diving deep into some really fascinating insights from 0 to 1, Notes on Startups, or How to Build the Future by Peter Thiel and Blake Masters.
And what's really fascinating here is this isn't just another business book.
No.
It's about a fundamentally different way of thinking about progress, about creation itself. We're going to explore what it really means to go from 0 to 1.
That jump.
Yeah, to invent something truly novel versus just going from 1 to n, which is basically copying or, incrementally improving.
Making more of the same.
Exactly. And this leads us right to a key question Thiel poses. What valuable company is nobody building?
Precisely. And Peter Thiel, the mind behind PayPal, an early investor in Facebook, co-founder of Palantir.
Quite the resume.
Right. He teams up with Blake Masters, whose super detailed notes from Thiel's Stanford class actually became this, internet sensation.
They were legendary.
So our mission today is to kind of distill their unique perspectives on how real innovation happens and why it's just so much harder, but also so much more rewarding than just following the path everyone else is on.
Yeah, and you'll hear why just copying Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg, that actually means you aren't learning from them at all. Not the important stuff anyway.
So this 0 to 1 concept, what does it truly, signify?
Well, it's about creating something completely new, something fresh, maybe even a bit strange, rather than just adding more of something familiar.
Right. Think about it. If you take one typewriter and you build 100 more,
that's 1 to n.
That's 1 to n.
Yeah.
Extensive progress, yeah. But if you invent a word processor from the idea of a typewriter,
that's 0 to 1.
That's the leap. 0 to 1. Intensive progress. It's not just about, fine-tuning old ways of doing things. It's really venturing into the totally untried.
And to put this in maybe a broader context, Thiel introduces these two forms of progress. There's horizontal, which is extensive, basically copying things that work. Think globalization.
Yep.
And then there's vertical, which is intensive, doing new things. That's what he calls technology.
Got it.
And he makes this argument that, since about 1971, we've seen really rapid globalization, but surprisingly limited technological development, and most of that's been confined to IT.
Interesting. So that challenges the common idea that globalization alone is our future.
Exactly. It challenges that narrative.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Thiel gives us this contrarian question. What valuable company is nobody building?
The secret question.
Yeah. And he says a good answer isn't something everyone already agrees on or just, taking a side in some familiar debate.
Right.
A good answer kind of suggests, okay, most people believe X, but the truth is actually the opposite of X. That's how you start to actually look into the future, find those hidden opportunities.
To really get this 0 to 1 philosophy, though, it helps to look back, specifically at the dot-com era.
Oh, yeah, the bubble.
Right. The mid-90s, people forget, were actually a time of, general malaise. You might remember images of American soldiers in Mogadishu or all that anxiety about jobs flowing to Mexico.
Vaguely, yeah. It wasn't all optimism.
Not at all. And that was the backdrop for the dot-com mania that really kicked off around September 1998. It was this intense 18-month gold rush where the internet suddenly seemed like the only way forward.
And Peter Thiel co-founded PayPal right in the middle of this.
Exactly, during this period. And their original grand mission, it was huge, create a new internet currency to replace the U.S. dollar.
Wow. Ambitious.
Totally. And their first product let people beam money from one Palm Pilot. Remember those?
Oh, yeah, the Palm Pilot.
Beam money from one to another. But, as Thiel recalls, and this is a quote, nobody had any use for that product except the journalists who voted it one of the 10 worst business ideas of 1999.
Ouch. That's gotta hurt.
Right. So that forced this pivot to email payments. A really crucial lesson learned right there at the start. Failure leading to a better path.
So, okay, the bust inevitably comes in 2000. Crash.
Yep.
And a new sort of dogma emerges in Silicon Valley. Make small bets, be flexible, improve on the competition, focus only on the product.
The lean startup mantras, basically.
Exactly. But here's the contrarian twist Thiel brings.
Yeah.
He argues the opposite principles are probably more correct if you want true 0 to 1 innovation.
So what are the opposites?
He says it's better to risk boldness than, triviality. A bad plan is actually better than no plan at all. competitive markets, they actually destroy profits and sales. Sales matters just as much as the product.
Okay, that point about competitive markets destroying profits, that really flies in the face of standard economics, doesn't it? Why does he argue that?
Well, to connect it to the bigger picture, Thiel really challenges this conventional obsession we have with competition. He uses Google as an example. Is Google a monopoly in search? I mean, 68% market share? Google is literally a verb.
Right. Seems like it.
Or is it just a small player in the massive global advertising market with only like 3.4%?
Depends how you frame it.
Exactly. And he suggests Google strategically frames itself as just another tech company, precisely to avoid that monopoly scrutiny.
Clever. So he's not saying monopolies are inherently bad.
No, quite the opposite, especially creative monopolies. He argues that in a dynamic world, these are actually powerful engines for progress.
How so?
Well, think about it. The government itself kind of has this contradictory stance, right?
Mm.
It grants patents, which literally create monopolies.
That's true, for innovation.
And then it prosecutes antitrust cases against monopolies.
Yeah.
He uses Apple's iPhone. Those huge monopoly profits weren't from, like, artificially restricting supply. They came from creating greater abundance, making something genuinely new and massively valuable that didn't exist before.
Okay, so the promise of those potential monopoly profits may be lasting for years or decades.
That's the huge incentive. It's what motivates companies to take the big risks, to invest in the long-term R&D that firms stuck in cutthroat competition just can't afford to dream about.
That makes sense. And Thiel even connects this to his own life, doesn't he? Missing out on that Supreme Court clerkship.
Yeah, he talks about that. He later realized that winning that ultimate competition probably would have changed his life for the worse.
Really?
It might have trapped him in what he calls an inherited old line of business instead of pushing him to create something totally new. It shows how rivalry, whether it's personal or corporate, can make us, overemphasize old opportunities and just copy what worked before.
Like those apes running out of shapes he mentions, with all the mobile credit card readers popping up trying to copy Square.
Exactly like that, just copying, not innovating. And we even saw this play out, this idea that war is costly business between Thiel's PayPal and Elon Musk's X.com back in the day.
Oh yeah, the PayPal wars, legendary intensity.
Right. 100-hour work weeks, engineers literally designing bombs as a joke. It just shows how that kind of competition can be incredibly counterproductive and distracting from the real goal.
So, okay, if monopoly is the goal for durability and profit, how do you actually build one? A durable one. Thiel outlines 4 key characteristics.
Right. First up is proprietary technology.
Meaning
your product is really difficult, maybe even impossible, to replicate. Think Google's search algorithms, right? Secret sauce.
Or PayPal making eBay transactions, 10 times better than mailing a check?
Exactly. That 10x improvement is a good rule of thumb, he mentions. Amazon offering 10 times more books initially, or Apple's iPad making tablets 10 times more usable through that integrated design. Yeah. It has to be a leap.
Okay. Proprietary tech, what's second?
Second is network effects. This is pretty familiar now.
Right. The more people use it, the more valuable it becomes, like Facebook.
Yep. But what's fascinating here, and maybe counterintuitive, is the paradox he points out. These businesses have to start with incredibly small markets.
Small. Not global domination from day one.
No. Facebook started with just Harvard students, not the whole world. He says this is why successful network businesses often aren't started by, traditional MBA types, because that initial opportunity just looks way too small to bother with.
Interesting. Okay, third.
Third is economies of scale. A monopoly gets stronger as it gets bigger. Pretty straightforward.
Spreading fixed costs over more sales.
Exactly. Software startups are the classic example, right?
Yeah.
The marginal cost of producing another copy is basically zero. It's not just about getting cheaper. It's about building a cost structure that competitors just can't match as you grow. Creates a moat.
Makes sense. And the fourth characteristic?
Strong branding. Think Apple again?
Okay, so proprietary tech, network effects, economies of scale, and branding. But, how do you actually start building this? It sounds daunting.
Well, you start small.
Yeah.
Really small.
Uh-huh.
And you monopolize that niche first.
Like PayPal did after the Palm Pilot flop.
Exactly. They pivoted and targeted eBay power sellers. Just a few thousand people, but they desperately needed PayPal's product. They totally dominated that specific segment.
And then expand.
Then, once you own that niche, you expand gradually. Move into related, slightly broader markets. Just like Amazon started with books, owned that, then expanded.
Until they're the everything store.
Right. And crucially, Thiel advises, don't disrupt. at least not in the way people usually mean it.
Meaning don't go head-to-head with the big guys.
Pretty much. Instead of directly challenging large competitors, try to expand the market. PayPal, for instance, yeah, they took some business from Visa, but mostly they grew the whole pie for online payments.
Creating a positive dynamic.
Yeah, unlike, say, Napster's fight with the music industry, which was just a direct zero-sum conflict.
Got it. Okay, shifting gears a bit. A really huge theme in the book is this whole question of how you view the future. Is it just chance, or is it something you can design?
Right. Thiel identifies 4 basic perspectives on this. First, indefinite pessimism.
Which sounds bleak.
It is. The future looks bad, and you have no real idea what to do about it. He kind of pegs modern Europe here, since the 1970s maybe, just sort of kicking the can down the road on big problems.
Okay, what's next?
Second, definite pessimism. The future is still bleak, but at least it's known, so you have to prepare.
Like hoarding resources.
Yeah, and surprisingly, he puts modern China in this category. They have fast growth, sure, but it's mostly by relentlessly copying the West. He argues they kind of know their living standards can't truly catch up to the West's peak that way, so they save everything they possibly can.
And he mentions that every senior Chinese leader experienced famine as a child.
Yeah, which deeply informs that view of a difficult but predictable future you need to brace for.
Okay, so 2 pessimisms. What about optimism?
Third is definite optimism. This is the belief that the future will be better, but only if you plan and work actively to make it better.
This sounds like the classic American dream, maybe.
No.
Or the Enlightenment.
Exactly. He says this basically characterized the Western world from the 17th century right through the 1950s, maybe 60s. He gives this amazing example of John Reber.
Who was he?
Just a school teacher. But in the 1940s, he proposed building 2 massive dams across the San Francisco Bay. And people took him seriously. They actually built a huge 1.5-acre scale model to test the idea.
Wow, that's definite planning.
Totally. And then finally, fourth, there's indefinite optimism.
Okay, how's that different?
Thiel argues this has dominated American thinking since, say, the early 1980s. The future will be better somehow. But you don't really know how, so you don't make specific, concrete plans.
So what do people do instead?
They focus on rearranging things that have already been invented. Think finance, law, consulting. The focus is on process, on keeping options open, rather than building concrete new things.
And this connects to someone like Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah, Thiel suggests that Gladwell, being a boomer, often emphasizes the power of chance and serendipity because that whole generation kind of learned to underrate the power of deliberate, bold planning.
So, okay, what does all this mean for actually building new stuff for startups?
Well, Thiel argues that while things like the lean startup methodology can be useful, they won't get you from 0 to 1 on their own, not without a bold, overarching plan.
Just iterating isn't enough.
Right. Iteration without intelligent design, without a real vision, just leads you to, like, local maximums. Small improvements, not big breakthroughs. He points to Steve Jobs as the ultimate designer.
Of products, obviously.
Yes, but not just products. He designed his entire business, planned for years ahead. He wasn't just iterating minimum viable products, MVPs. He had a grand vision.
That makes sense. Now, something else that really stands out in the book is this idea of the power law. How does that fit in?
Yeah, the power law is crucial, especially in venture capital. What Thiel explains is that most companies backed by VCs actually fail.
Right, that's well known. High risk.
But a tiny few, the outliers, become exponentially more valuable than all the others combined.
So it's not a normal distribution.
Not at all. It's heavily skewed. And this often gets missed because investors, naturally, spend most of their time dealing with the average companies, especially in the early stages.
But the huge returns come from just 1 or 2 big hits in a fund.
Exactly. And these wildly successful companies have a massive impact. He cites figures like them creating 11% of all private sector jobs, generating revenues equal to 21% of GDP. Think about the dozen largest tech companies, all venture-backed, worth over $2 trillion combined at the time of writing.
Wow. So this raises a really important question for you, the listener, right, as an individual.
Yeah. Do you try to start your own company, aiming for that huge outlier success?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it maybe smarter to join the very best company you can find while it's still growing incredibly fast?
Because the power law suggests.
It suggests the differences between companies are vastly greater than the differences in roles inside most companies. Owning even a tiny fraction, like 0.01% of Google, is unbelievably valuable compared to owning 100% of a startup that goes nowhere.
That's a sobering thought, and this connects to another core idea, secrets.
Yes, secrets. Every valuable company that nobody is building right now is, by definition, based on a secret.
A secret meme.
Something important and unknown, something hard to do, but actually doable.
And people often don't believe secrets still exist.
Right. Thiel talked about this idea of flatness.
Yeah.
The assumption that if something truly new or valuable were possible, someone smart would have already found it. The world feels mapped out.
And this disbelief can actually cause problems, like bubbles.
He argues yes. The disbelief in secrets, ignoring underlying realities or unsolved problems, can contribute to things like the dot-com bubble or the housing bubble, where market values became completely detached from fundamental truths because people stopped looking for or believing in hidden factors.
And he uses Hewlett-Packard as a kind of cautionary tale here.
Yeah, it's a stark example. HP had this amazing decade of invention in the 90s, really innovative, but then they just stopped. Their board got bogged down in internal politics, fighting, gossip. They completely abandoned the search for new technological secrets.
And the result.
By 2012, HP's market value wasn't much more than it was way back in 1990, adjusted for inflation. It's a really powerful reminder that companies have to keep searching for those secrets.
Like Andrew Wiles finally proving Fermat's last theorem after centuries.
Exactly. Or in business, like Airbnb and Uber, uncovering these huge pools of untapped supply, spare rooms, cars, and unaddressed demand, things hidden in plain sight until someone looked with fresh eyes.
And secrets aren't just about tech, right? They can be about people, too.
Absolutely. What are the things people aren't allowed to talk about? What are the conventional truths that might actually be wrong?
Like the monopoly secret he mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Competition and capitalism are actually opposites. Monopolists always try to downplay their monopoly status, while companies stuck in fierce competition desperately try to exaggerate how unique they are. It's a hidden truth about how people talk.
So if you're looking for secrets, where should you look?
Look where nobody else is looking. Fields that clearly matter but haven't been standardized or, professionalized into rigid dogma. He gives nutrition as an example.
Nutrition, really?
Yeah. He says, somewhat wryly, that we arguably know more about distant stars than we do about basic human nutrition. It's a field ripe for secrets.
Okay, let's dig into another critical point Thiel makes. Something he calls Thiel's law.
Ah, yes, the foundation law. His friends apparently tease him about it. It basically says a startup that's messed up at its foundation cannot be fixed later.
So those initial decisions are absolutely crucial.
Paramount.
Yeah.
Like choosing a co-founder. He compares it directly to getting married.
High stakes.
Totally.
Yeah.
You need to know each other really well.
Yeah.
Ideally, share some kind of prehistory together because founder conflict. It gets as ugly and destructive as a bad divorce.
Which brings up the whole question of company culture. It's not just about perks, right?
No, definitely not beanbag chairs or free massages. That's superficial stuff. It's about the substance. Thiel argues company culture isn't something separate from the company. The company is the culture. It's a team unified by a mission.
And the PayPal mafia is the prime example of that.
Absolutely. Think about it. So many of those early PayPal people went on to found or co-found other billion-dollar companies. Tesla, LinkedIn, Yelp, YouTube.
It's an incredible network.
It shows a culture, a way of thinking and working that was strong enough to actually transcend the original company itself.
So how do you attract the right kind of people to build that culture, not just anyone?
Well, not with generic claims about, we hire smart people or we solve challenging problems. Every company says that.
Right. It's meaningless.
You need to explain specifically why your mission is compelling and unique. And just as importantly, why your company is a unique match for that specific individual personally, why they belong there.
And the perks. Free laundry.
He basically says just cover the basics adequately. Anyone who's genuinely swayed by free laundry pickup or like pet daycare, they're probably not the kind of mission-driven person you need on your core team anyway.
Okay, connecting this to the bigger picture. Engineers, tech people, they often undervalue distribution, right? The sales and marketing side.
Hugely. There's this persistent belief, especially among engineers, of if you build a great product, they will come.
The field of dreams fallacy.
Exactly. But Thiel flatly argues that the best product doesn't always win. You absolutely have to make customers come, and that's usually much harder than people think.
And sales ability is key everywhere.
He argues it distinguishes superstars in almost any field. Wall Street deal makers, rainmaker lawyers who bring in big clients, even university professors who are good at self-promotion and getting grants. Sales is crucial.
So Thiel breaks down different distribution channels, doesn't he? Governed by that CLV-CAC rule.
Right. Customer lifetime value has to be higher than your customer acquisition cost. Makes sense.
Yep.
For really high-value products, say million-dollar deals, you have complex sales. This takes months, maybe years, and it often involves the CEO directly. Think Elon Musk securing huge billion-dollar contracts for SpaceX.
Or Alex Karp at Palantir, meeting clients constantly for deals ranging from $1 million to $100 million.
Exactly. That's complex sales.
Yeah.
Then for deals maybe in the $10,000 to $100,000 range, there's personal sales.
So a dedicated sales team building relationships.
Yeah, like how Box started by selling to small groups within larger companies, building from there. ZocDoc is a really interesting case here.
How so?
Because the product itself actually becomes a form of distribution. As they add more doctors to the network, the platform becomes more valuable to patients, which attracts more doctors. It feeds itself.
Ah, network effects driving distribution. Clever.
And then, of course, you have more traditional advertising, like Warby Parker, using catchy TV ads for their relatively inexpensive eyeglasses.
Or viral marketing, where the product itself encourages users to invite their friends. Classic examples, Facebook and PayPal itself.
Oh yeah, PayPal famously paid users.
Yeah.
They gave you $20 to sign up and another $20 to refer a friend.
Wow, that must have cost a fortune.
It did.
Yeah.
But it led to incredible, 7% daily growth at one point. It worked.
So lots of channels. What's the key takeaway?
The key is what Thiel calls the power law of distribution.
Another power law.
Yep. It means that for any given business, one single distribution channel will likely be far more powerful and effective than all the others combined.
So don't try to do everything.
Exactly. Trying a kitchen sink approach, dabbling in a bit of everything, usually means you end up getting zero channels to work effectively. You have to find your channel and focus.
And as Thiel says,
poor sales, rather than bad product, is the most common cause of failure. It's a blunt assessment. And his final kicker on this: if you don't see any salespeople, you're the salesperson.
Huh. So true, especially for founders. Okay, another really fascinating, maybe counterintuitive point is Thiel's take on the future of work with computers. Man and machine.
Right. We see computers beating humans at chess, Deep Blue versus Kasparov, or on Jeopardy, Watson versus Ken Jennings.
Yeah, the narrative is often about replacement.
But Thiel argues that basic premise that better computers will necessarily replace human workers is fundamentally wrong. He insists computers are complements for humans, not substitutes.
Complements, not replacements. That's a big shift in thinking.
It is. And he points out this categorical difference, like a supercomputer needed to scan 10 million YouTube videos just to identify a cat with, 75% accuracy?
While a 4-year-old kid does it instantly.
Flawlessly. His point is computers are incredibly powerful tools. They don't compete for jobs or resources in the same way humans do. And leveraging this complementarity, he thinks, is the path to building great businesses in the future.
So how does this complementarity actually work in practice? He gives examples, right?
Yeah, PayPal again. Back in 2000, they were losing $10 million a month to credit card fraud. It was an existential threat.
Wow. How did they solve it?
Their solution, which they called Igor, was a hybrid system. It combined computer algorithms, which were great at flagging potentially suspicious transactions, with human analysts who made the final judgment call.
So machine flags, human decides.
Exactly. The computer handled the massive scale, the humans handled the nuance and judgment, and this hybrid system was absolutely key to them finally reaching their first quarterly profit.
And Palantir is built on a similar idea.
Very much so. Palantir software is designed to empower human analysts in national security, finance, healthcare. It helps them do things like predict IED locations or track down child pornography rings. The computer augments the human expert.
And LinkedIn didn't replace recruiters?
No. It totally transformed how they do their jobs. It gave them incredibly powerful tools for, essentially, human detective work and persuasion. But it didn't eliminate the recruiter.
It seems the ideology, though, in computer science often does focus on replacement, on automation, uber alles.
Thiel knows that too. But he argues the most valuable companies going forward won't just ask, what problems can we solve with computers alone?
They'll ask.
They'll ask, how can computers help humans solve really hard problems together? It's about intelligent design, leveraging both strengths to build a better future, not just, fearing replacement by the machines.
Okay. As we start to wrap up this deep dive, Thiel provides a kind of checklist, right? 7 crucial questions every startup has to answer.
Yes, the 7 questions, super useful framework. Number 1, can you create breakthrough technology? Is it 10x better?
2, is now the right timing? Is the market ready?
3, are you starting with a big share of a small market? That niche monopoly idea again.
4, do you have the right team? The people question.
5, do you have a way to actually deliver your product? That's distribution.
6, will your market position be durability? Can you defend it long term?
And finally, number 7, the big one. Do you have a secret? That unique insight nobody else sees.
And what's really insightful is how he applies these questions, using the clean tech bubble of the 2000s as a big cautionary tale, showing how many failed these tests.
Yeah, he doesn't pull punches there. For example, on the engineering question, the tech, he points to Cylindra. Their fancy cylindrical solar cells were actually radically inferior in efficiency compared to standard flat ones, like by a factor of pi.
Ouch. Not 10x better then.
Definitely not. And on the people question, he notes that many clean tech companies were run by, quote, salesman executives in suits, not by actual technologists. He saw that as a huge red flag. For him, real tech founders wear T-shirts and jeans.
A bit stereotypical, maybe, but point taken about needing technical leadership for tech companies.
Right. And the distribution question was often a mess, too.
Yeah.
Like that company Better Place with their electric car.
The battery swapping one.
Yeah. The whole sales process was confusing. The battery swapping network was cumbersome. It just failed to connect with most customers. Didn't deliver.
So their main problem, Thiel argues, was often relying on these sort of vague, conventional truth, like the world needs clean energy, instead of having specific, unique secrets about how to actually deliver it profitably.
Exactly. But then he contrasts this with Tesla. Tesla, he argues, nailed all 7 questions.
How so?
Well, their technology, for instance. They integrated many different components, batteries, software, powertrain design, into one demonstrably superior product. Consumer Reports rated it higher than any other car. Elon Musk also played the timing question perfectly. They secured that crucial $465 million loan from the U.S. Department of Energy right at a unique political moment when green jobs were a huge priority.
Right place, right time, with the right plan.
Mm-hmm. And this all kind of leads into the final big idea, the founder's paradox.
The paradox being?
Thiel talks about how successful founders are often seen as these really unique, maybe even eccentric, distinctive individuals. Think Richard Branson and his whole Ice King adventurer persona.
Or Sean Parker, evolving from infamous hacker to Facebook president.
Right. These figures become almost like American royalty. They get celebrated but also demonized. Kind of like Elvis or Michael Jackson or even earlier controversial tech founders like Howard Hughes or Bill Gates. There's something larger than life about them.
And Steve Jobs' return to Apple is the ultimate example.
Absolutely. Kicked out of his own company, he comes back when Apple is near bankruptcy and then launches the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, making Apple the most valuable company on the planet. It shows the almost irreplaceable value a visionary founder can have.
So Thiel argues we kind of need these unique, maybe difficult individuals to push companies beyond just safe, incremental improvements.
Yeah, he seems to think so, but he also adds a crucial caution. Founders have to be careful not to overestimate their own power or importance. Their real value, ultimately, is in creating an environment that brings out the absolute best work from everyone else on the team.
So it's a balance, the visionary leader who also empowers the team.
Exactly. It's a paradox.
So wrapping this all up, what does this really mean for you, the listener? We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we've really delved into this profound difference between just, copying what already exists, 1 to n, and creating something entirely new, 0 to 1.
We've seen how thinking differently, sometimes even embracing monopoly, deliberately designing for a specific future, and even that often overlooked art and science of sales and distribution.
All critical. Absolutely critical for building something truly valuable and lasting.
And this whole deep dive, drawing on these remarkable insights from Peter Thiel and Blake Masters, it really challenges us, doesn't it? Challenges you to question the conventional wisdom you hear everywhere.
It definitely pushes you to think harder about where those truly untapped opportunities might still lie. And maybe even to reconsider what it really means to be innovative in a world that feels saturated with information, but maybe is starving for genuine creation.
Yeah, starving for that 0 to 1 leap.
So here's your provocative thought to maybe mull over after this. If Thiel is right that poor sales rather than bad product is the most common cause of failure, and this punchline, if you don't see any salespeople, you're the salesperson.
Yeah.
What secret about distribution, about reaching your audience or customers, are you maybe overlooking in your own pursuits right now?